Okay, here we are. Veterans for Peace. It doesn't say live yet. It's not telling me it's live. It's saying it's scheduled. But here we are. It's 5 o'clock Eastern every Wednesday. The Veterans for Peace Stand Down live webcast. Still not telling me we're live, but I'm going to go ahead and assume we're live.
I'm 20 seconds in the live, bro, with two people.
20 seconds in the live. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're here today. Got a lot on our minds, a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. We have a special guest today, Sean F. When Sean is here, he's an About Face member. Are you a Veterans for Peace member as well?
No, but I've been talking to Garrett today, maybe about changing that a little bit. So yeah.
It's all big, one happy community, and I like to see as much kind of interaction between different veteran organizations as much as possible. The more we silo, the more we lose our voice, I think. So I'm also a member of About Face. Today we're going to talk about the U.S. elections and defending them from reactionary violence and police violence across the nation. So Sean, tell us, give us a little bit of an overview about the different organizations that you're working with and the goals for election defending.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main organization that I'm working for or with right now would be the Working Families Party. The Working Family Party is part of this Popular Front that is the Frontline. The Frontline is, like I said, a popular front kind of anchored by the Movement for Black Lives, Electoral Justice Project, the Working Families Party, Rising Majority, and a bunch of other social justice, Black liberation, Black-led folks of color and Indigenous folk-led organizations from across the country. It's a national organization at this point. We'll have a link, I think, to the Frontline so folks can see what it's about. But primarily working within the Frontline as an election defender. So the election defender program of the Frontline is aiming to turn out people to all polls, especially polls in priority states like North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and to make sure that basically everybody that can vote is able to vote, and that every vote is counted on election day and then after election day as well. So the program and the project that we're working on doesn't stop on November 3rd. It's definitely, we're in it right now. There are multiple states that have early voting, and we're starting to see reports coming from there. We're seeing more people have voted now in this election already than I think previously in early voting like record. So as a veteran election defender organizer, I'm specifically working across both veteran membership-based organizations as well as non-veteran membership organizations like MoveOn.org or the Movement for Black Lives or these larger organizations to kind of collect the veterans in those organizations and to turn them out to be election defenders. The idea is that veterans with our skill sets have some ability or a deeper commitment to ensuring that the very tenets of our democracy are able to be practiced on election day, and that for some folks that may be more comfortable serving in roles around de-escalation, bystander intervention, but not to say that veterans aren't needed to do voter care, to do media intervention, media talking. And so we are turning out thousands of people to polls all over the country to deal with whatever it is that happens on election day. The biggest threat at certain polling places may be not enough signage, or perhaps missing charging cables for voting machines, or it could be reactionary folks blocking polling stations, or any number of threats that we kind of anticipating and seeing across the country.
Very good, very good. So I've seen some accounts on like Twitter and on social media of actual violence or actual kind of like people blockading voting booths or voting stations. Is that true? Is that happening, do you think? Are there people out there doing that? Do you think that's a strategy that's actually going to be applied by the right wing?
Yeah, I think it is true in some places. We have seen documented evidence in Virginia, per se, in which folks have turned out and attempted to block the entrances to polling locations. There are two versions of electoral, like this election poll monitoring, poll watching kind of thing coming from either side of both parties. One is a focus on de-escalation and making sure that everyone can vote, and the other one is a matter of intimidation or disenfranchisement. So there's a lot of different things that people are doing. We haven't seen direct violence by any means, but there have been. I just saw a report of folks in both Florida and Alaska receiving direct emails with their addresses telling them to change party affiliations or that they would have to pay for it. And then we've seen police at polling stations wearing Trump 2020 mask, which is in violation of polling law. And I'm not an expert on polling laws, and they vary state by state, so I can't really talk specifically to that type of stuff. But there is a push, and I think there is a concerted effort of some kind to make it harder for people to vote, and not only that, but to possibly just really discredit any results that come in on election day, or to discredit the results of certain places, after the fact. So there was an arson attack. My understanding is in California, I believe, on a early voting, like a mail-in ballot, drop-it ballot location. So all of those votes, up in flames.
I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime here in this country. And so I think a lot of people think that this is being a bit extreme, thinking that somebody has to go to the polls and make sure that it's safe. What do you say to people who like naysayers who might say, "Oh, you're creating this. There's nothing out here." I know what you just said, but I haven't seen it in my city.
Yeah, I'd say welcome to the party. We are finding ourselves engaged in, or finding ourselves in the midst of probably one of the most historic moments in at least my generation, my lifetime, and that includes this election. I think when we look at the totality of the past year, the uprisings as a result of the George Floyd murder, the Breonna Taylor murder, all of the murders of Black folks across the country, that this is just a continuation of what we've seen. Sometimes history, 10 years of history, a decade of history can happen in a couple of months, and I really do think that we're in that type of moment. I don't think there's going to be intimidation or violence at every single polling place. I think what is critical to understand about crisis in general is that for the most part, there's a lot of normalcy to it. So there are a lot of people that are going to be able to experience and vote under normal conditions. But we do know, just based on current trends, predictable trends, that this election is contentious, and this is the most contentious election of my lifetime, I would imagine, going into it, and whatever comes after it. There are a lot of organizations that have spent a lot of resources to game plan and to plan out scenarios as to like what could happen. A massive bipartisan group of folks from both sides of the aisle convened with the Integrity Project to kind of game plan and scenario out what the transition projects. So I think it's the Transition Integrity Project, kind of going off the top of my head here. But what they looked at was the period of time from November 4th to January 20th, and what are the scenarios that could play. And those scenarios, for the most part, are really scary, and they're really dangerous for a lot of people in this moment. And so we have to recognize that when people that are well established within the current political structure on their own can come up with bad realities. The realities that a lot of people, poor people, Black people, Indigenous folks of color, and stuff like that, the realities are that the stresses that are already on those communities are going to be even more stressed. What we see as a result of the George Floyd uprisings is a mass mobilization of people, a lot of people that before have not been involved within, especially within an electoral context, taking to the street and demanding action and getting action in a lot of places. And along with that movement in this time, we see an alignment of both neoconservative and neoliberal groups aligning themselves all in the defeat of the current administration. And so what's really important in this moment, and why the Frontline exists, why Election Defenders is important, is that when the dust does settle, there's going to be a need to push to make sure that this neoconservative, neoliberal kind of alliance that exists right now isn't able to dominate the narrative and dominate our communities and recuperate or take back the power that has really been built in this year. So if everyone, there's always a contrarian, but I think to the most part that this is a really important time. And as veterans, when I took on this job, I've only been doing this for 3 weeks. When I took on this job, the kind of thought that I had was when I was in Iraq in 09 and 10, we surged in we surged our operations and we protected the elections for prime minister in that time frame, or we worked at protecting polling places in that sense, of the context of a imperialist in Iraq. And the thought that here I am again in my own so-called country, doing the same work, or thinking that it's possible that people might be injured or killed trying to vote in this country is just, it's kind of mind-blowing to me, for sure, to think that that's where we're at, but this is where we're at. So
yeah, the empire comes home. The violence that we sow overseas always comes back, and the decline of capitalism is inevitable. And here we are witnessing it and breathing it every day. So I think a large part of our audience, the people who actually might sit and watch this, are veterans and military members. So what role do you think veterans, what do we have to play? What should we actually be doing? What are some basic steps that we should take to ensure that there's safety at the polls?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I want to lead with, and one thing that we're going to be talking on this orientation call with the Frontline tomorrow, the link's going across the bottom there, is just showing up correctly. We have a lot of conditioning. We also have a lot of triggers. And I think when veterans end up in spaces that maybe are heightened, are tense, we can both, there are two ways that we can show up. We can show up correctly, or we can actually do more harm for showing up. So I think the first step is understanding that, especially within the Frontline, and why it's important to engage with the Frontline, is that the Frontline is the result of the organizations that have been doing the work on the ground at the grassroots level for not just this past year, but for years within communities and Black communities. It's a Black-led, multiracial, or popular front. And so how is it that we're going to show up for those communities without, to me, when it comes to community safety, community defense as a whole, I've been doing that type of work for a couple years after getting out of the military, is there's a real big difference between working with a community and occupying that community. If we're looking to demilitarize our responses to things or demilitarize our culture, then we need to understand that there's a lot that goes into showing up in a community. So the work that we're doing now with the Frontline is the result of relationships with grassroots organization. It's a result of turf negotiation and making sure that our partner organizations are supported, that we're not stepping on toes. And so there might be ways to show up that doesn't take into account Black and Indigenous and folks of color leadership in this moment, and it doesn't take into account the work that organizations on the ground has really done. So I think the first step is to show up correctly and to understand the community that we're in and what we're representing. I think the second thing then is finding the place that fits best for you. When I was approached with this position or the concept around it, it was kind of this context of, let's just turn out veterans. Veterans are good at veterans can do de-escalation because that's the most heightened situation that maybe perhaps people might find themselves in. But I think that really pigeonholes us as a community and a collective of people. There are people that may very well not ever want to deal with tension that might have triggers that de-escalation requires, that could trigger traumas and responses to those traumas. And then also that the fact that like there are a lot of us that just care about people, and maybe we want to show up and make sure that people have personal protective equipment, PPE, to vote, right? Do they have a mask? Do they have hand sanitizer? Are we passing out gloves because we're sharing, surfaces and stuff? I think there's a need for folks that have the ability to make people feel comfortable. If you think about it, like when you're kind of a captive audience when you're waiting in line, and your polling line is maybe 3 hours long, and there's a group of assholes out there that are like yelling at you or yelling racial epithets or something. So not only are we need to be comfortable to interject ourselves into to break that up, or to de-escalate, to distract or something like that. We need people out there that are making people feel comfortable and making people feel good about themselves and about what they're doing. People that are building people that people power right there in line. Like what types of chants, what types of communities can we build in this moment when people are in the midst of a pandemic, risking their lives and to vote, and then they're receiving harassment from other places. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just a matter of creating a wall around people. It's not a matter of occupying the space in like fatigues or something, or turning the narrative onto you, because the act of voting in this moment, I think, is a brave act. And so we want to highlight the communities and the bravery within those communities, the powers within the power within that community that's actually taking the risk to vote. And again, this is a nonpartisan. So we're just trying to guarantee that anyone can vote, regardless of who they're going to vote for. But we want people to be able to vote. We want that vote to be counted.
Very good. You're muted, Miles.
Mike, I'm sorry. You want to ask a
question? No, go for it.
Hey, Sean, you spoke to a couple really good points there. I want to touch on. How do veterans show up? And then you gave examples of how to show up properly. And you also made a really good point that not all veterans are the same. You can't pigeonhole everybody. And you can't pigeonhole everybody at the protests. You can't pigeonhole everybody at the, our experiences in the military were so different because of where we came from, because of what we saw. So that is such a valid point. I just wanted to highlight that. Not every veteran who shows up to be a poll defender is going to be a big protective body.
Yeah.
Right.
Clearly, we're going to have some Second Amendment guys, like, what are they, the Boogaloo Boys or whatever the hell they're doing. Yeah. That's going to be a presence. So, I mean,
I want to ask everybody watching right now to share this. We're hovering around 30, like 35, 37 people. If everybody who's watching right now clicks share, and you share it on Facebook with a quick comment, and share it on YouTube with a quick comment, maybe Twitter, however you share it, please share it. And let's triple this conversation. This is such a relevant conversation for right now. When is this happening? I think some people think the election is November 11th. That's Armistice Day. It's not. Yeah. When is the election? It's November 3rd. Like, it's 2 weeks away.
2 weeks. Yeah, absolutely. 2 weeks. And the thing is that it's happening now, right? And so a lot of the trends, we expect any type of activity or any type of intimidation, disenfranchisement to increase as we get closer to election day for specific places. So what we can pull from now is we can see what that mobilization looks like of folks that are trying to disenfranchise or harass people We can monitor networks and see what the chatter looks like, what that talk looks like up into this moment. And I do want to talk about the fact, because it has come up on some of the trainings, like what we're telling people is that de-escalation, that's the point of engagement that we want people to engage with. We don't want people, we're the frontline election defenders, veteran election defenders, we're committed to the concept and principle of nonviolence. And so that's something that is, I think, held individually very differently for different folks. And personally, in the broader context of my life, I do not adhere to nonviolence. I do think that even the definition of violence is different based on what community and how you're talking about it, where you're coming from. But in this case, we are committed to that nonviolence. So there are skills that we do have as veterans, if we are going to show up, that I think are important, that other folks may not be thinking about. So even if you're a community lifesaver, or was a combat lifesaver, if you are a medic, if you have an IFAC, something like that, and you show up to a place in which people are armed, I think that's a resource that you're bringing, and a knowledge base that you're bringing that the majority of people around you aren't going to have. It's not going to. I don't anticipate it. I haven't seen things that suggest that it's going to be like protests where there are street medics and stuff at these locations. It's going to be mostly folks, regular old folks with regular old skills. And I think it's important that we're committed to nonviolence. But the thing with violence is that oftentimes when it happens, you don't have a choice in that, and it's extremely quick. And so having even these basic kind of understandings of how to deal with stuff that other folks don't have is another great way to show up. So you can show up, do community care, do de-escalation, but on your back hip, maybe you have your IFAC or you have your medical kit or something like that, to be able to help folks if necessary, you know.
Okay. So could you clarify what are the different organizations that you're working with? And what's the principal organization we should be directing people to for more information?
Yeah, so the principal location to direct people for is definitely the frontline.org. The Frontline is the Popular Front. And so with all Popular Front models, there are multiple organizations that comprise that front. The two anchor organizations that I want to talk about are the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project, which is the project that allows the Movement for Black Lives to engage in electoral work, and then the Working Families Party, which is a third-party political party that runs candidates and then supports progressive candidates across the country. I've been here for 3 weeks. I've seen the organizational chart. It's a complex movement. It's a complex thing of structure right now of people from all over the place, and we have partner organizations from all over the country as well. But for the most part, I would like to direct people to the front line and not necessarily speak to all the partners within the front, because honestly, I don't know everyone that's involved. What we do see is that within the Veteran Election Defender Program, About Face, Veterans for Peace, and Vets for the People are really kind of holding down a lot of the core chunk of the work. And those, we've been pushing on people's lists. We've been doing reach outs. We've been recruiting folks. There are a significant amount of members of Veterans for Peace that are a part of this program already. So.
Okay. So these trainings that I believe you just had your first official training yesterday, and you're having another one today, and then several more over the next several days.
We've actually had about, I think, four trainings so far. So the way that it's worked is the Election Defenders has done a push, and every Tuesday for the past month, there's been a training that focuses on specific skills. That first training kind of was an orientation to the program, and then talked about our use of Slack, which is that digital workspace app that maybe some folks are familiar with. Slack is the main community in which people are both self-organizing into their states and into their roles, and into like our veteran community on Slack. And then we've had trainings around de-escalation, just 101, very basic 101 trainings on de-escalation, on media intervention, on poll watching. We've had folks come from the NAACP to talk about different the different legal structures around poll watching, what's allowed, what's not. Again, that stuff is oftentimes dependent upon state or locality too. So it's a general overview of those things. All of our trainings are available to watch. The thing is once you watch a training, once you complete a training, then you get access to the Slack. So if you're looking to get involved, the place to start really is with that, with the trainings that are going across. But the training tonight is a 201 kind of deeper dive into de-escalation. The call tomorrow for the orientation call is going to talk about, again, showing up correctly. We're going to talk about the roles and structures that people can play. There are a couple other roles that I haven't talked about for folks that with direct action experience. We're looking for people to be on call to do a more direct action if it's needed. If it's a matter of people are blocking like different things, like there are folks that have experience kind of engaging in making the call on the ground, doing the assessment, making the call on the ground, and acting how they need to. We also have there's different leadership opportunities within it too. There's people that are kind of in charge of counties and the polling places within the counties. There are people that are in charge of states. Like I said, a whole structure, and there is a need for folks to really step in. I think like just my experience in what in the Army we call it S3, but in operations, working within those structures and those cells, like there are people with that type of knowledge, operational knowledge, management of schedules and people and time. That's a needed skill. Logistics, that's a needed skill. There's a need for everything, and so we'll talk about what those roles are, those structures are, and how to get involved with that. And then again, we're going to cover de-escalation, continue to drive that home, and then media intervention. And so I know I'm talking to you all right now, but I'm probably not the best person to put in front of a camera at all times for a lot of different reasons. And so we're going to give people the skills, the language that they need to talk. I think it would be really powerful. It's going to be really powerful when veterans stand in front of a camera on an election day with a bunch of supposed patriots behind them, talking about how those people are the ones trying to stop people from voting, and we're here to try and just help and make sure that people are voting and that their votes matter. So I think that's really important. So that's what we're going to roll with tomorrow. We have another call scheduled on the 28th as well. It may be a repeat of some of that information and new information. Not 100% sure. I just want to get through tomorrow. It's been a busy 3 weeks, so one step at a time. But
very cool.
It's a good way to live, is like accomplish what's right in front of you. Do it well, do your best. You there must be, clearly you said legal structures, so there's lawyers in every state, and it's a nationally coordinated project. You're getting trained for your state. It's not just a ramshackle thing. I love the way you're discussing it. People thinking they know how to de-escalate. This is an art form, right? This being taught how to use your language skills to bring another person down from an unbalanced state, or right a potentially dangerous place. Maybe outnumbered, maybe most likely outnumbered, you would assume, watching the news. But I also like how you're saying that there's not, you don't see it everywhere, and where you are, you don't see it. And right, it's peace. It must be peaceful where you are. I can't imagine that it's violent.
I don't know. In Knoxville, our early voting has just started, and we haven't seen anything. If I look at the trends here, and specifically in this area or in this city, we didn't have a lot of activity. We had protests, but we didn't have the type of things that we're being seen in some cities in regards to that. And we've also had anti-mask. Like I live in Tennessee, so anti-mask pro-virus, pro-corona types of rallies and stuff like that have occurred. But there hasn't been any, as far as I am tracking in regards to everything, there hasn't been that type of intimidation taking place here in Knoxville. But Virginia is just a state away. And so we do know that in Virginia, like I said, really early, their early voting was some of the first to start in the country. And so they did have some issues with folks. So I do think it's gonna, and then also like when we look at the capabilities of the right, I think the uprisings and the Black Lives Matter events that have like really taken place over the past couple of weeks or months have shown that they're not necessarily organized as we think to kind of conduct something. In some cities, folks have been going for 100 days, folks for 50 days, 60 days. And we don't see that from the right. We don't see that type of commitment to their values in the same type of way. So just because we haven't seen something now during early voting doesn't mean that they're not planning something, or they're not groups of people planning something for the 3rd on election day, or right up before that, or something maybe closer. I don't think they have the ability to push us and respond to us. I think they're in a reactionary moment themselves. And what I'm super excited about with regards to this election defense and with the frontline in general is that we have a multi-organizational structure that is being built in this moment quite rapidly, but this infrastructure hasn't existed. This infrastructure for moving people, this infrastructure for communication and decision making hasn't really existed in the same context before doing this. The Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project, the Working Families Party, has put a lot of effort and energy into making sure that we're able to capture the people that have been showing up in the streets for the past couple of months, and moving them. They might not be excited about the candidate that's voting, but they are excited about Black liberation and Black lives. And so having that infrastructure built right now is important for what are those scenarios that come after November 3rd. There's a number of things that can happen. There are hard dates that need to be met with electors being sent to Congress, and a total number of things. We know that there's going to be legal battles. You can look at the 2000 election, the Bush-Gore election in Florida, and the Brooks Brother riot, which was a far right, like basically, I mean, it was a riot of far right operatives under the control of that one guy that was with Nixon tattooed on his back, Roger Stone. Yeah, that one guy. But under control of Roger Stone, that stopped a recount and basically was one of the contributing factors to the Supreme Court deciding that George Bush would be president. So there's a lot of things that could happen between November 3rd and January 20th, and even after January 20th. And so this infrastructure is incredibly necessary for any type of for all of our movements that are working towards the liberation of Black folks, and just even just a better world in general. Just like whatever that you can quantify that in so many different ways. And so this is a really important moment and a really important reason to get involved at the grassroots level. Election defenders teams are going to be made up of people that are local to their polling places. So if you want to get involved, if you haven't been involved, if you've been in the streets, if you're unsatisfied with the candidates, but you know that the potential for something better is out there, you can see it, you can taste it, you can feel it in the air, then this is a place to get involved, for sure.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like it is a bright spot, the fact that people are organizing and communicating and building these infrastructures, because it certainly seems to be a dark time where we're left between a dark choice and a darker choice. And I honestly couldn't tell you which one is darker when it comes to the election. So yeah, the fact that we're organizing, I think I know I've learned a lot in the past several months with the protests in the streets. I was out there hitting the streets and figuring out how to present myself and how to who to show up for, who to support, and how to get all my talking points in line, and understand that, it isn't this kind of farce democracy that we're presented, that we're fighting for. It's more just these grassroots movements, that we're getting together, that we're talking about it, that we're starting to understand class politics. Yeah, and we as veterans obviously have a very important role to play in that, and we're obligated. I would say that veterans, if you've been an Imperial Stormtrooper in your past, as we all were, that you have an obligation to get your politics right, and to go out there, and if you're really interested, if you really thought you were serving people, if you thought you were serving democracy, as it were, in the past, the reality is that you weren't, and you need to start now. We started this podcast as a response to the protest that took place a few months ago, because the National Guard were called into the streets. And that's something that we don't want to see. I always drive this point home, and I'm sure it's repetitive to the few people that watch this program every week. But, who knows? Somebody might see this. And, if you're active duty, if you're in the National Guard, if you're a contractor, we at Veterans for Peace and About Face and veterans around the world that have good politics, we think you should stop. We think you should get out of the military. You should refuse orders. You should be working to undermine your chain of command. You should be talking to lawyers. Go out. GI Rights Hotline is there. There's a phone number. There's also a website, GIRightshotline.com, I believe. And you should go out and you should talk to them. Start building a case to get out of the military. Start getting your disability packages together. Start doing these things. Make a plan. Get out of the military. So I just had to pitch that real quick. That always takes up a good couple minutes. So we've covered a lot of ground here in a lot of space. What do you think? Where should we go from here? Does anyone have anything we need to clarify?
I just want to, if it's cool, real quick, I just want to drive home GI Rights Hotline again. I did 10 years out of a 12-year contract, and the reason why I was able to get out of those last 2 years is because I contacted them and they gave me the knowledge outside of fear, the actual knowledge as to how to do that, and recognizing, my role within imperialism. It was the GI Rights Hotline that really kind of pushed me to be able to do what I was able to do and find myself where I'm at now.
Well, that sounds like a hell of a story.
Sean, yes, exactly. I want to go into that, Sean, because you're selfless. You haven't talked about yourself at all. And I want to hear your story a little. You know what I'm saying? I want to hear your story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? How did you get to this point where you are?
Yeah, for sure. Like we talked on the phone last night before this and prep for this, but so I was in the Army. I was an Army reservist. I joined when I was in college. I joined when I was 21, because I went to a very, very small college with 2,000 folks in it. And at that point in time, there was a National Guard unit, a local National Guard unit that was deployed. And when that National Guard unit came back, I saw people with legs missing, and I saw people that had gone into Iraq, into a combat zone, and the conditioning of my upbringing, coming from a military family, needing to pay for college myself, a whole bunch of things going on. In 2007, I joined the reserve in order to finish out school and at the same time be in the military, pay for everything. First person in my family to go to college. So that was important to me. I deployed shortly thereafter. I was an intel analyst, but I deployed doing surveillance and reconnaissance for what was called Task Force Odin, but in the back of an airplane, doing a lot of the things that we associate with drones, but from an actual airplane. And
let me just stop you real quick. Let me just stop you real quick, because you said a lot really fast.
Yeah.
You joined I want you to start at day one, because you started where you are now. I want you to start at day one. Tell me when you were 17 or whatever it was in 2007 that you joined.
Yeah, like I said, I was 21. I needed to pay for college. I was massively in debt for what that was. That was right before the surge in Iraq. So bonuses were up there. Student loan repayment was up. And I also like recognized that like I probably wasn't going to get a job with just a degree in government from a small state school. So I needed to get a career, some experience, something like that. And I joined, and as soon as I graduated, I received deployment orders, and I ended up in Iraq in 2009, doing surveillance, reconnaissance, and target acquisition from the back of a small airplane. I did that job. That there wasn't an MOS for it. I was trained by a defense contractor to do that skill set. Was able to do well on my deployment, so I got a job as a defense contractor when I got back. In 2010, I deployed as a contractor in 2011, training National Guard soldiers how to do that work in Afghanistan. Deployed in 2012 as a reservist, working as a intel analyst for the Mayor Cell in Kandahar Airfield. And then I came back in 2013, deployed as a contractor again to Afghanistan for that program. Over those periods of time, those deployments, I really kind of became exposed to certain things, specifically within the world of defense contracting, that was unbelievable. And working as in the Mayor Cell at Kandahar, I saw corruption. I heard about treason. I saw any number of things. I was extremely dissatisfied with my chain of command and my leadership in those moments. And it wasn't really until I lost a soldier in 2014 that I recognized that I was participating in a huge death cult, a huge death machine, that was really only looking to enrich the people that had contracts or that were making money off of it, the defense industry. I dealt with a lot of dignified transfers and fallen hero transfers back to Dover, Delaware, as part of that. And I never thought about the humanity of what I was engaged in until it directly affected me. And my soldier died in 2014. And that kind of that moment and that reckoning with that moment brought me to About Face. About Face began the political education process and began giving me the language in which I could deconstruct imperialism and deconstruct the conditioning, understanding what the poverty draft is, understanding the way in which conditioning started for me before I was even born as a result of both my parents being in the Air Force. And I began to work against those systems, even while within the reserves. There's a lot of opportunity to be to do a lot more than just 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer kind of thing. And there's ways that you don't even have to do 1 weekend a month or 2 weeks in the summer. So I began to do everything that I could to both limit my exposure to the military and to find a way in which I could start aligning my values to my reality. And so the GI Rights Hotline is the people that I ended up calling, and they were able to walk me through the process of being put into the IRR. And then I was discharged from the IRR in that context. And what I realized was that nothing that I really did in the military was ever for anything other than either myself or for somebody else to make money off of. It was never for a community. It was never for anyone back home. It wasn't for my parents. It wasn't for anything. But I really started becoming involved in local organizing and what grassroots organizing. I became involved in understanding what the far right was, and how the far right was organizing. And so I saw Charlottesville in 2017. I realized that I had a specific set of skills that could be used to protect communities, actual communities of folks. I realized that though without specific reparations, the only way I could give back to communities that have experienced harm because of my participation in the military, or just the military industrial complex, that I needed to bring those skills to those communities as best I could, and to democratize the skills around, threat tracking, understanding the logistics of what it looks like, how to operate within a team, how to defend communities, how to defend physical space, what does digital security look like, and how we can do those things are just a couple of the key things that I think are important that we can bring back. And so I became involved with the racial justice organization called Showing Up for Racial Justice, which works to move white folks for racial justice around the country. It's a national organization. There's possibly Surge chapters in your own community. I worked with Surge to help track and kind of develop the political education necessary for their local chapters to combat the far right, both locally and nationally. I then took the skills that I had and I did disaster relief with an organization called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. And I found that taking a small team through the wall of a hurricane into a community and establishing a distribution point was actually something that my body reacted to in a really great way. And I found a lot of strength and inspiration in the concept of mutual aid and reciprocity of giving and also receiving from communities. And so I did that work, and I've done community safety work all throughout Appalachia for targeted and marginalized communities. And it's all a result, I think, of finally understanding what the military, the lies that it had sold me, and then being angry about that, and knowing that there's also a path away from that. And so now I have the opportunity to work with this amazing Black-led multiracial front to just defend even the basic tenets of I don't even like saying American democracy, because or our democracy, because the Electoral College kind of throws that democracy thing into a loop, but this very basic tenet of the idea that at least your vote matters, and that anybody should have the right to vote. So I do think there's a direct line I can kind of trace over the past 3 going on 4 years, but to where I'm at now. So I'm really blessed to be here. I'm really blessed to have had the mentors and teachers and the opportunities that I've had. But I've also sought out a lot, and I've been open to criticism, and hopefully to the point to where I've been able to develop trust and community with folks. And that's really the main thing that kind of motivates me and drives me at this point.
Excellent. It's funny, you and I were kind of doing similar work in Iraq in 2009. I was with it just goes to show, people who think the military is, disciplined and they really got their shit together and they know what they're doing and they're just making these great plans and winning these wars. Man, they don't know what the hell they're doing. I was sent to Iraq in 2009. I was in the Navy, and the Army was stretched so thin that the machine was so enormous, trying to do whatever the hell they were trying to do in Iraq, that they requested Navy units to come and help them as part of that surge, Obama's surge, by the way. Yeah. So we brought in these maritime surveillance planes that were 30 or 40 years old, that were built to track submarines during the Cold War. But now, since they were useless and the Cold War didn't exist anymore, they sent us to Iraq, and they were flying these 30-year-old airplane, turboprop planes in the desert in southern Iraq, 120, 130 degrees temperatures in the summer with just dust storms, trying to keep these old ass vintage, it's like trying to keep a Model T running, on the worst desert ever. So yeah, and we were flying around taking pictures of targets or insurgents or whatever, and it all just amounted to nothing. We were just doing. Every single flight we went up, there was at least 6 people, maybe 10 people aboard a flight. Every time we took off, we were risking the was 6 and 10 people to just accomplish absolutely nothing. And it was really defeating.
I do think we probably shared a runway at some point outside of Tikrit, because the Navy definitely used our flight space before, and I bet they were. I think I could probably imagine what the planes were in general.
Yeah,
I think,
P3 Orions. They look like
yeah,
they're from the 70s.
yeah, I was in King Air 250s, so twin engine turboprop, converted VIP planes. But that's the thing, that there's a lot of different watershed moments. I talked about Charlottesville, that kind of like made something click in my head, but also Standing Rock and watching the way the National Guard, watching the way that confluence of local police and the National Guard, up to, like, where was the federal government involved in all that stuff as well. But watching those same systems that I was using against supposed terrorists and foreign countries to be used against indigenous folks, that have suffered at the hands of the U.S. military for the entire history of this country. That was a moment in which it was very easy to kind of recognize, like, oh, there's something wrong here. There's something greatly wrong. And the cognitive dissonance is the thing that moves, continued to move me, and just recognizing, like, that, yeah, this is absolutely wrong. And I couldn't have imagined at the time being a National Guard's soldier deployed against those folks at Standing Rock that were literally just trying to protect their community's water, and to have that happen. And now we see National Guard soldiers that have been deployed in the past uprisings that are on standby right now. I think I saw Arizona and another state have already activated their National Guard, in order to respond to other states' needs. And it just gets to, like, the counterinsurgency of it all, where they got to move people from out of state so that they don't have any relationship to the local population to put down whatever may happen. The fact that these things are happening right now, we need the infrastructure, we need the trust that we're building with each other, to really exist. And the frontline, being a veteran election defender, really offers that opportunity to folks. One opportunity, not to say it's the only opportunity.
Right on. Yeah, they're out there just spinning their wheels. These kids in the National Guard, or even these grown ass adults, these grown people, they have no idea what they're doing, and they're just passing the buck. Can you imagine out there using weapons? At Standing Rock, they were spraying freezing cold water on people when it was out there below zero. It was really cold. It was something like 10 or 15 degrees, and they were spraying fire hoses on people.
These things are all interconnected. There's such a there's such a low level of training for people who are put in charge of other people's lives and safety, like police officers, you know what I'm saying, should be trained a lot longer than they are for the job that they do. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
The police academy should be a holistic experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you talk about defunding the police, like, the whole thing needs to be changed. Like, these ICE officers, whoever's empowered ICE and given these people martial powers. I heard on Democracy Now! This morning that over 500 young people will not be connected with their families, will not be reconnected. There's so many families that have been deported already, and the children are here. And then there's so many children missing. I mean, we've heard about children being kept in hotels for months. And so, like, the disconnect is insane. I love that. I love the passion that you bring to this work, Sean, and that you are bringing a perspective to the public that they don't often get to see of veterans, and putting a good light, a different light onto things. I think people generally see veterans as good, but just blindly so. And so this gives it some context, because it doesn't have to be violence in every city street. I put up these comments earlier about it seems peaceful here, because it doesn't have to be violence everywhere for fascism to take over, as we've seen, with Trump in the past 4 years, with normalizing the statements. It really could happen anywhere, So I was playing devil's advocate earlier and throwing some what ifs at you, but it's beautiful to hear like the way you answer and the context. I can see that the training is really good, you know, like you're really reserved and peaceful in your is that something you brought into the training, or have you gained that in recently?
It's definitely something I've gained. I've battled with my own PTSD and my own triggers, and I have found myself at the end of the police violence and the violence of other folks. I've committed violence in the military, and throughout my life and stuff. So I think it's just a matter of de-escalation is a mindset, but it is a skill, and that's why we're training it, and that's why we're giving best practices to folks, because it's something that we can it's something that we can develop within ourselves. Just finding grounding in yourself sometimes could be the hardest thing, and that's really the place that we want to start with when it comes to de-escalating other folks. We want to be grounded. We want to have a firm planting on this earth and within ourselves, understanding where we're at. I think that you can be trained on anything, but also going to where your heart leads. I think there are veterans that with ability or body type or presentation may feel that they're too at risk to do something like de-escalation or bystander intervention. And so again, finding what role you have, I think, is the important part. So
would you recommend people go out there just without training? Would you recommend they take the time to go to these trainings? You're having a lot of trainings, correct?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% going to push the trainings. Because two things happen is that when we are put into high stressful situations, we know, some of us may know that you operate from a fight, flight, or freeze mentality, right? That reptilian brain in there is activated. So what trainings do is they allow us to develop the muscle memory, the cognitive memory, so that when we're in that mindset, that we can act appropriately, or we can act and push through that, if that's fear or whatever. And so 100%, I would push these trainings. I would find YouTube videos of trainings. I would find what local opportunities you have. There are medic collectives all over this country that teach people medical skills. There are folks that teach direct action trainings across this country, both organized and like from a 501c3 kind of component, but also a non-501c3 component, understanding what it is, like what's available to you in your community. I taught myself radio communications using a Baofeng, watching YouTube, so I think at least the basic programming and stuff, but like, I think there's opportunities for people to develop their skills. And the reason why we need to develop these skills is so that when something happens, it's not the first time for us to experience that, so that we can react appropriately. You need to train that side of your brain. I can drive down the road, smoke a cigarette, text, sing a song all at one time, and I'm not really thinking about it, right? But then put myself into a certain situation, I may have to act. I may forget how to even turn the wheel, or I may forget even how to put that cigarette up to my mouth, because the situation becomes so tense. And so you need to train your brain in order to do that. Develop that muscle, and cognitive memory is necessary. So all of the trainings that we're doing are being led by people that are deeply experienced. We have folks from the Blackout Collective. We have folks from the Ruckus Society. There are people that have years and years of experience doing these trainings on how to talk to the media, how to do de-escalation, how to just take care of each other. So I would definitely drive home the need to do in that training. But then to think beyond November 3rd again. These trainings, these things that we're exposed to now, the need for this is going to carry over. It doesn't matter. We have the choices in front of us are not good really either way, actually. And so one is we're going to have to deal with an immediate threat immediately, or we're going to have to, maybe find some space over the next 4 years to deal with what comes next, or what eventually is coming. Because we do know that capitalism in decline, what the response of the state is, and what the response of that class of people is. They need business to continue as normal. And so when we're becoming ungovernable, or when we're making business not operate as normal, they're going to revert to a specific type of violence, right? And we need to be prepared for that. So.
What's your shirt say, Miles? I can't read it.
It says American.
Oh, okay. All right.
The way I look, you know what I'm saying? People have to be reminded sometimes. People like to, don't let me put on one of my kufis made by my aunt as well. You know what I'm saying? Because then people assume, like, without beyond the shadow of a doubt, that I'm Muslim. You know what I'm saying? I have to be a practitioner of Islam if I have a goatee and like a skull cap on. So it happens quick every time. It's assumed. And you mentioned that earlier as well, Sean. You mentioned the way people present. They may not want to put themselves into a position. Imagine a black presenting male, cis male presenting or putting himself at polling stations in Utah. You know what I'm saying? He's asking for he's asking for it. You know what I'm saying? Not really, because he's just doing his human duty. You know what I'm saying? His American duty. But
yeah, I think, we all, the mystique of being a veteran offers the privilege in which we can work through, and so that's kind of where we're at, is how can we use our privileges to keep safe, to empower, not even to empower, to facilitate the power of communities. The power already exists in these communities and with people. We just can utilize our privilege as a white cis presenting male like myself to do things that other people may not feel safe about or doing, or to navigate things. I can infiltrate a boogaloo space a lot easier than some other folks, maybe in some context and in the past, to say that I haven't used the language and kind of cultural understanding that I have to navigate spaces to get information that's going to allow me to help protect my communities or something that's important. And here, this is just another opportunity to build with folks, to understand what it means to be in a community of people working for a goal. And because Election Defenders is localized, because we're turning out a local election, like people at local polling places, it's an opportunity to either build with the people that you're already connected to. Since COVID, there's a lot of conversation around pods and like this idea of pods, and like I keep my pod and then we're sharing the same kind of immune system maybe as the people I live with in my house or the people that I work with if I have to go to work. And then so it also is an opportunity to build with people you may not have ever met, that you didn't know that were in your community, that are committed to the same values that you're committed to, or at least share some overlap with that. And I think the only thing that's going to get us through this 2 weeks, the next couple of months, and really, and this inevitable kind of collapse of systems in our environment and our ecology, is the strength of our communities. And so that's what, like, this is an opportunity to build that. This is an opportunity to push beyond that. If we think, if our first response when we see trouble is to call the cops, like here are some skills that maybe you can now work through before you do something like that, with the idea that, I want to live in a world where there aren't any police, so I have to develop skills and I have to develop trust and relationship and community in order to do that. But I've got a t-shirt and it says stronger communities make police obsolete. And I believe that. And I also, like, this is an opportunity to begin on that step, if you've already been doing it, or if this is your first time kind of engaging with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I live in a broke up, shitty neighborhood, and we just had a police shooting the other day about 2 blocks from my house. And so that really strikes home with me. Like, obviously that this community is impoverished, and our community council and our local government is just absolute crap. So yeah, absolutely, we need to build a stronger community to make these police obsolete. Same with the military. It goes for everything. It goes for the government.
We all want the same things. Yeah.
Well, we're at an hour. We've gone a little bit over an hour, and I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that we should clarify or make? I mean, we've done lots of calls to action already. Is there anything else we should cover before we close?
No, I really just want to push folks to our call tomorrow, our orientation. We're going to have a really good call. There's going to be, quite a few folks on that call. It's a good place, a good starting point if you haven't been involved yet. If you've been to the other trainings with the Frontline and with election offenders, this is your opportunity to be in community with your veteran comrades. And I think that's the important thing. I also, just on a personal note, want to push people to understand that what the past couple of months have shown us is the power of individual and community action. And regardless of where the money's going, regardless of where the attention in the news is, people in a concerted effort can make an exact change within their own lives. And I think that's really that type of mentality, the bravery that it takes to do something like that is really important right now. And so just to continue to move from a place of bravery and solidarity with each other is really important, regardless of what happens and regardless of what tomorrow brings.
That link that Sean is talking about is at the top of the comments, everybody. There's a live link. We put a few live links at the top of the comment section. So you don't have to try to type in what's scrolling. You can just click on the live link, and please share that with your family, with your friends. And we thank you for being here with us today for this important conversation. Sean, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for joining us and dropping knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot, Mike and Miles. I really appreciate it.
So
no problem. It was fun.
In the chat section, asked about a personal issue of a personal contest I was in. I did not get selected, but I do have a dope show coming up on the 29th. So please check out my website and my feeds and support and show love. And thank you for tuning in with that. We are all full people. You know what I'm saying? We all have full lives. And this is a piece of us. This is an aspect. And it's how we try to bring peace to the world. So all of you out there, do your thing, right? Live your life, love your family, and you got to do your thing. But you also have to make the world a better place for the future, for your children, for their children. Because when you leave, like, you could just throw your hands up and be like, okay, I'm done. Or I know it's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway. I don't care. But you got little ones here. You got. If you don't have children, you have nieces and nephews. There's children in your community. So really, take the time to investigate and educate yourself and improve your community and the lives around you. All right?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.